All right, we're live again. What is today? I don't know, March 4th, right? March 4th, today, a new episode of the live chat. Already, Jeremy Brand is in the chat. What's up, Jeremy? MMA Sucka, the owner, founder, creator, the man behind the machine. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, I got two special guests today. Nick, he's absent today because he is busy with the UFC 259 coverage all week. Today was like media day. Tomorrow is the press conference. This guy is swamped, so he's busy. He's occupied. So we got Kenny Lee. Kenny Lee from
What's up?
MMA Sucka. He is starting his MMA journalistic journey with that website. He's joining us for the first time. And then our special guest is Patrick. I don't want to butcher your last name. Let me know how to say it properly. Explain to me what it is. Come on.
It's Auger, but if you butchered it, it's fine. I butcher everyone's names. You call me Auger. It's just stuck half the time. So whatever works for you, man. We go way back,
Yeah.
so it's all good.
Yeah, I think I've probably pronounced it auger before, you know what I mean? So then when I first heard, I think Drake pronounce your name, I was like, "What? That's how you pronounce?" I didn't even know that. I was like, "Damn, that's kind of offensive, you know." But yeah. So OJ, Patrick OJ of the Fight Business podcast, the Body Lock,
Mhm.
and that's the first thing I wanted to get into. But before we get into that, I wanted to give you some backstory of me and Patrick, right? When I was at the Body Lock and I was, contemplating like quitting. Like I was contemplating quitting. Like I was contemplating getting I'm finished with this like interviewing and covering MMA. I'm just gonna like chill out and just watch the sport, from afar. And Patrick came up and he made a kind gesture, and I didn't take him up on it, but it was a kind gesture. I'm not gonna get into what it was, but he made a very kind gesture. And if that kind of like changed my mind a little bit too. I didn't take him up on it, but it changed my mind and said, man, there's people out there that want to see the content, and that support, what I mean? Because sometimes you do this and you feel like, am I getting the support that I need? Am I going on the right path? Am I doing everything properly? Stuff, doubt comes into your mind because you get kind of stuck in the mud sometimes from time to time. And but Patrick, you helped me, man. I never told you this, but I'm telling you right now, live on the show, my show. Because if Patrick wasn't there, I probably wouldn't be doing this live show. You know what I mean? He's pivotal in this. So
Wow.
I wanted to say I'm grateful for the gesture that you gave out, and it helped me, man. Like kind of kick into gear again and continue doing what I was doing. So thank you very much, Patrick, for doing that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, of course, man. That's awesome. That's it was a no-brainer for me, right? Like you are one of the hardest working people in the biz. Day in day out, you're doing interviews. When we were at the Body Lock, a ton of content was just, hey, write up JHK's interviews, like because he's got an endless swarm of them because he's talking to everybody, and so that's dude, that's an honor. I had no idea that was that pivotal for you. So yeah, man, anytime. I'm so happy you stuck with it. I love where you're at now. Love to see you growing and just keep, getting up there. I saw the mug, the Kumite TV mug that James Lynch showed. I'm gonna have to get me one of those too. I'm gonna have to get some merchandise because it's been a long time coming, and you totally deserve it, man. So yeah, no problem at all.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. And it's good to see the growth of you and the evolution of what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like now you got the video content pumping out at the Body Lock. And I wanted to get into that first, like why did you decide? Why did the Body Lock decide, okay, we're gonna kind of go away from focusing on this and focusing on the video content and pumping out like pretty much instant reactions. You guys are doing a lot of that too, a lot of fight companion style videos and a live stuff, and just talk about that and the evolution. Was it your idea, or was it damn Jake's idea? Well, whose
Jake's-
idea was this?
It was. I think it was kind of a combo. Jake ultimately made the call. I know I pushed for it a little bit. For me, it was kind of a natural thing where at my time at MMA Sucka, actually, I had done the Fight Business podcast a couple times to try it out there and really enjoy podcast audio or video more. For writing, I'm an all right writer, but it's a lot of work for me. It's not my natural talent in terms of, you know, getting things in on deadlines or writing up long pieces. Like, it takes me a long time. If you've ever seen one of my pieces and you've been like, oh, that's good, like, I appreciate it, but it took me so long to get it to you, much longer than, you know, some of the writers in the industry who could just churn stuff out. And so, you know, I decided I really wanted to move more towards video or audio, and I talked to Jake about that, and we were at a point where, you know, at the Body Lock, we had consistent content coming out writing wise, but I know Jake had always, our editor, always talked about, you know, looking into video more. And, you know, you obviously love the video stuff that you had done, and we wrote up, you know, a ton of things about. And so we started trying it, and from there it just was kind of natural, where, especially with the crew we have over there, writing is not probably any of our fortes. I would say Drake is a great writer, right? He contributes for us a lot. He's, you know, he's out there churning out pieces all the time. But for the rest of us, we love to, you know, be more in front of the video, and our strengths are better suited to that naturally. So it was just kind of a natural evolution with who was there to start, you know, going after this. And as we did, it really just kind of snowballed into, you know, where we are now, which is really faster than I thought we would be past the 1,000 subscriber mark. I'll say that. So,
yeah, you guys just hit recently the 1,000 subscriber mark, which is pivotal for anybody that's running a YouTube channel, because you get to monetize, and that helps. Every little cent that you could generate from anything that you produce is important, especially in this new field. It's still new, you know what I mean? Like, the coverage of MMA is pretty new, and you have to find your niche. You know what I mean? We always we talked like about this before, but it is important to find your niche. Like you said, you realize, hey, writing might not be my forte. I don't produce as quick as these other guys. You know, these other guys are very fast at, you know, some guys are putting out content in like 20 minutes. Like, you see some news break, and then all of a sudden there's an article in 5-10 minutes. I'm like, who are these guys? These guys are machines.
yeah, no, I'm right there with you. That's, you know, I would do a business piece, and it would take me like weeks sometimes, and it would end up being like okay, like, and I was all right with that at the time, but it was one of those things where, just for me, evolving as a writer, I knew that this would take. It would take me down a path that I didn't necessarily wanted to go down, to put in the effort that me personally I needed to get to be on par with some of these other guys. Whereas with video, I feel like I'm much more just naturally suited for it. Like, I can, you know, take scripts, do notes, and keep evolving in that regard. And it's just a better fit for me. But yeah, you got to find your niche. You got to play to your strengths too. I think that's a very important part as well.
All right, so the reason why we have Kenny is Kenny's starting in his journey, like I said earlier. So we have to get his perspective on like his niche and like just covering shows and interviewing fighters, because you've done a little bit of everything, right, Kenny? So where do you feel like, what's more fun for you right now? Because you've done a little bit of everything.
Well, I would say I'm the opposite to Patrick. At the moment, I'm a lot more comfortable just writing at the moment, and I'm just better at that. And this is my first time on the video podcast, so, you know, I'm a little bit nervous but excited. But hopefully I'll get more reps in doing this kind of stuff as well. And yeah, you know, I want to try out everything. You know, I'm just starting out in the MMA journalism, thanks to you, John, as well. So you know, hopefully we'll see where it goes from here.
So do you plan on doing more of the video? Is that something that you're interested in, or do you want to sit kind of in the background and just write more?
I definitely want to have a go at it. And, you know, as I interview fighters as well, you know, I'll become better at speaking on camera as well, that sort of thing. So I definitely want to have a go at it. And if there's a point in time when I feel like it's not my forte, I'll probably just stick to writing. But we'll see, man.
Hey, is it just me, or if you have like a British accent, it just sounds better? Like, even in interviews? Like,
100%.
I don't know,
it doesn't
man.
seem like they make mistakes. Like, when you have the American accent, your speech just sounds crooked for some reason, you know. But when you're doing the British accent, it just sounds more smooth and more intelligent. We sound like some dummies sometimes, right, with the American accent, right, Patrick?
Hey.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, 100%. I sound like an idiot a lot of times, and I'm okay with it. I've accepted it, but yeah, I'm jealous of Kenny right now for sure.
Yeah, I would
And
just
then
say
I'll-
the opposite. I feel like the American accent sounds a lot more smooth. I feel like the British accent is a bit more like rough, I'd say. But hey, if it sounds okay to you, then I'm happy.
Yeah, it definitely sounds better. I think that's why they narrate everything with British accents, because it just sounds like if you go to university, you want your professor to have a British accent just because it sounds smarter than anything else. So, you know, it is what it is, like with the British accent. But I've tried it. I'm gonna try to do one show with just straight British accent, my imitation of a British accent, which is probably terrible. But everybody that I do the podcast with, except for Drake, has a British accent, so or Australian or whatever. So it's but I'm so used to it now. When I listen to it, like it's not something that I don't understand. I got used to it because Australians, New Zealand, you know, the UK, it's a little bit different from each other, but it all sounds intelligent, much more intelligent than us. Anyways, going back to the body lock, right? You guys have many different types of segments, but it seems like it's the same four. I call them the four horsemen. You remember back in the WCW days, was it Ric Flair and all them? I feel like you guys are the four horsemen right now of MMA. How did you guys bring that team together? Like, because Matt Wells, he wasn't at the body lock. Oh, and I think Ant Walker, he wasn't at the body lock at that time. It was Drake did a little bit of work, right, with the body lock, not so much. But how did that group come together?
Yeah, so I mean, it was interesting where for a while, right, when we hit this kind of lull in terms of just and we were kind of pivoting to experiment with this new type of content. For a start, it was just me and Michael Fidel. And we were going out and doing videos. He had his Fighting Words podcast. I had my Fight Business podcast that he would co-host on as well. And then as he kind of, you know, moved into his own thing with MMA prospects and all that stuff, we needed to fill the void. And so Ant Walker, I had known from working over at SureDog. And so, you know, I had Jake say, you know, what about Ant doing some side work here? Because I knew he was looking for some more freelance stuff. And so he got involved. And then I forget when it happened exactly, but I saw a tweet about Matt Wells saying that he was basically, you know, a free agent. Or I talked to him it was either that or I talked to him in a specific podcast where he said, like, yeah, he was no longer doing fan-sided. He was kind of open for work. And I'd seen Matt's stuff and he was great, especially, you know, videos, the Slip and Dip podcast, all that stuff is phenomenal. So I immediately went to Jake and was like, dude, we got to get this guy. And we got him on, and Drake was still there in the background. He just had been busy doing a bunch of other stuff. And so after pestering him for ages of being like, come on, Drake, like, get back involved with us and get on this video thing. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. And then once we got rolling, I mean, it's just been, like you said, a natural flow of the four of us. And yeah, it's worked out extremely well, but just really good timing and, you know, pushing for guys that we knew would meld well together. I think the type of culture we have at the Body Lock right now is perfect to churn out a ton of content, but still keep it fun and, you know, playful, competitive, all that stuff. It's a great culture with the mix we have, which is awesome.
Yeah, I got so much love for the Body Lock. They helped me a lot. You know what I mean? Like when I was churning out interviews, when I was working with them, they would write up almost every single interview, and that helped grow me. You know, it helped put my face out there much more. And you know, you can never change that, man. I could never, you know, Jake, respect to Jake. I wish Jake is watching because he comes in here once in a while and peeks his head in. But you know, Jake, much love to Jake. Jake has always been a phenomenal person and helped me a lot, man, to evolve into what I'm doing right now, man. Like doing this, just continuing it, right? And Jake, much love to you and the Body Lock. And whenever you guys write up an interview now, even though I don't work with you directly, I still, I still have to retweet it, whatever I need to do to kind of help you guys out. And yeah, much love to the Body Lock. Now, before we continue to the next topic, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. If you have a question or a comment, put them into the chat, the live chat right there. We'll get into whatever you want. We always have, our regulars, but if you're new, please push that like. Go follow Patrick on Twitter, Kenny on Twitter. I'll get to those at the end of the show. And yeah. So, anyways, the first thing that I wanted to get into is today or yesterday. I don't know, wherever you are in the world, it's today or yesterday. Ali comes out and says that his client, right, who mysteriously gets re-signed after being cut by the UFC for sneaking in a bag. His friend snuck into the hotel on Fight Island, climbed across balconies and delivered a bag. And then afterwards, this is what I believe happened. He was leaving and got caught by security, right? And then the whole fiasco happened. He got cut and then he got re-signed. He got booked for another fight. Ali comes out, says that there was potatoes in the bag. Now, Patrick, do you believe that there are potatoes? They didn't have potatoes at the hotel?
But let me say this. If there were potatoes in the bag, that is the dumbest reason I have ever heard in my life for a fighter to break protocols and get cut and then basically have to renegotiate or whatever to get back into the promotion. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard if it really was potatoes. But no, I don't think it was potatoes at all. I'm pretty sure it was something else. What? Who knows? But potatoes, come on. I mean, come on.
Exactly. Like potatoes, like strawberries, what, apples, what are we doing here? Carrots, like, come on, what are you making, a salad? Like, what other bags did you sneak in there? You know what I mean? Like, before that, imagine how many people were sneaking in bags before that. Think about it. There must have been other fighters, other people connected with camps sneaking in stuff, right, through the same method, because I don't think that they would come up with this on their own. Somebody must have done it before, and then they heard about it, and then they used that same method, and now they got caught. Now on Fight Island, most likely the security is tight, and no one's gonna get in anymore. But yeah, what do you think about the whole getting cut and then getting re-signed? Because if it wasn't such a big deal, right, about what was in the bag, why would he even get cut? I mean, was it just Dana White kind of being impulsive? Do you think it was him being impulsive at that moment and saying, like, we need to cut this guy? Or do you think it was something really serious? Like, there were illegal things going on?
That's tough because I think part of it comes down to the agreement that the UFC had with Abu Dhabi's Board of Tourism as well, right? I mean, if you're looking at how these events were put on at Fight Island, the Abu Dhabi Tourism Board essentially okayed all of this, allowed them to come into the bubble, paid for a lot of their tests apparently, put them, on Yas Island. There's conflicting reports, but a lot of them point to Abu Dhabi footing the bill for most of the logistical parts of this. If that's true, they had a very strict protocol in Abu Dhabi, right? And even if it was potatoes or something harmless or what have you, which, again, it probably is something more nefarious, we don't really know, but that, I'm sure, would have caused waves if he had broke that protocol and then Dana did nothing. If he broke the protocol and then Dana was like, oh yeah, like, we're going to reprimand him or fine him or something, it's possible Abu Dhabi was like, no, you've got to let him go, or you have to make a big gesture, because I would assume they were more pissed than anything else, because they're the ones that are footing the bill for all this, setting up the protocol. If you did have a situation where you had an outbreak and then their, people, workers for the hotel and people like that got sick, right, or caused some sort of mini outbreak, it could have been a very big deal. So I think it's a combination of probably something nefarious in the bag, but also just breaking those protocols. I can't imagine the Abu Dhabi, officials didn't have something to say with that matter.
Oh, definitely. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a big reason why the UFC is in Abu Dhabi, why they are on Yas Island. It's not because it's the best place on earth. It's because, it's all about money, man. It's all about money. And if you can make money off, if you can make money and continue pumping out shows and running your business, you're gonna go there no matter what, man. It's just they're connected to the government, so you could get in there real easy. But like you said, you had to do something, and maybe you went to him and said, hey, I know you snuck in some potatoes, but we're gonna have to cut you, and then we're gonna re-side you in a couple of weeks just to we slowly slide you back in. No one's gonna say anything. No, yeah, no one's gonna really say anything. Nobody really cares because there was no like criminal charges or anything like that. And like you said, nobody got sick. Nobody, there was no outbreak on Fight Island. Because imagine if that caused an outbreak on Fight Island, then dude, UFC would be screwed big time.
Dana would be pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a real bad time. And before the pandemic happened, the UFC signed a 5-year deal with Abu Dhabi and the Abu Dhabi government and the official board of tourism to host so many events there. And it got modified with Fight Island, right? If an outbreak happens there and you don't do something like firing him, then I wouldn't be shocked if there's some clause in that contract that then Abu Dhabi could say, yep, no, we're not doing this anymore, and your contract goes up in smoke. And if that's the case, then you're talking about tons of issues. Not to mention, right, if it caused an outbreak, what the PR nightmare and health ramifications would be.
Definitely. And it's from a fighter's point of view, right, that's on Fight Island, a coach, a teammate, whoever's there with them, and these guys are sneaking in something, right? Word on the street was that there's a lot of speculation about it was roids. Why would he be sneaking in roids? Think about it. Like before the show, like what kind of roids are you taking? You're gonna get tested right after the show. Like what kind of roids are you sneaking in? And there's someone said that he snuck in some vaccines, right, for coronavirus. Stuff like crazy stuff like that. But yeah, it's now that it's over and nobody got sick and nothing really terrible happened. It's okay, right? You let them in. There's no big deal. The only big topic would be what's in the bag, and maybe we'll never find out, or maybe we'll find out in a couple of days. Maybe Ottman will tell us. I don't know, but I don't believe the potato story. Now, yeah, it's a trip, man. That is the focus. That maybe he will be known for that for the rest of his UFC career, where he might fizzle out, and then the best thing we know about him is that he was a knockout artist that had a secret bag on Fight Island, and that's what he wrote in his yearbook, right? When he ends his UFC career, I don't know, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. Those guys are oddly super famous and have these athletes in other parts of the country, they have interesting ties to very interesting characters, right? If you notice, right? Even Khamzat and a Taisumov, and with the Chechen dictator, right? There's links over there with them, and they're kind of born into it, and it seems like, right? So transitioning over to connections with people like Khamzat, right? He retires, or supposedly he retires, and then what is it? Kadyrov, right? Kadyrov, the dictator from Chechnya, right? He says he calls Khamzat and convinces him to unretire. How can you read into this, Patrick? What isn't that weird? Why would he call him? It's not like it's his mom or dad or something.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where when you look at Ramzan Kadyrov's track record of athletes, right? He is a big proponent of having MMA, soccer, football stars, lots of different sporting athletes. He picks a couple of stars and he shows them a great time. He has big promotions with them, live events. He goes to live events like UFC events in Moscow, right? When Magomed Ankalaev, who's one of the fighters who fights out of his MMA gym, had that big win. He is very well known for doing something called sports washing, which is essentially he does a lot of things that if you want to know more about it, Kareem Zidane is the go-to guy for all of that info. I can't break it down any better than he can, but he basically commits some of these international crimes, and part of the reason why the U.S. has sanctions against him specifically as a person right now is he commits things that go against international law, and then he kind of brushes to the side and wins back public approval by having big sports stars in his presence and throwing parties for them and making a big deal out of his sports teams and sports connections. When it comes to Chimaev, Chimaev exploded on the scene in MMA, was massive, had the, crazy turnaround to fight at 2 different weight classes, demolished everybody in his path, was definitely a rocket towards stardom, but also fit the mold of someone that Kadyrov would like to promote. I mean, Khabib is another fighter, right? That Kadyrov had close ties to, promoted big time. Khabib is now retired. You also had, just this void where, hey, here's Chimaev kind of possibly filling that void. I really think that's part of the reason he was as popular as he was is in my opinion, Khabib hit his height of popularity right when he decided to retire. And then you had another fighter from, that background and, having, just the same sort of connections as Khabib did, and the same type of pride that Khabib did, and following the same routine and rituals, that it kind of swept a lot of people that were all about Khabib now started following Chimaev. And so Kadyrov is getting involved because he sees the opportunity again to connect himself to a big time sports player that helps his image as someone that's doing good things, that's entertaining others, that's helping star athletes, rather than some of the other things that he's been doing in Chechnya, which again there's a long laundry list of things he's done that has caused sanctions from not just the US but several other countries. So I think Kadyrov got involved because he didn't want his new MMA golden goose to kind of go away, because he doesn't really have anyone else there other than Ankalaev, since Mir and Fabricio Verdum have left, and that was people again he used to associate with regularly. They've both kind of moved on. In terms of a big MMA star, it's Chimaev or Ankalaev, and that's really it. Ankalaev's not quite there yet, so I think that's part of the reason that he reached out to him and made that Instagram post saying that he was good to go.
When I look at him, he reminds me of comparing like figures in history. It kind of reminds me of Pablo Escobar for some reason. I don't know why. If you watched Narcos and seen like what he did, but just Kadyrov, he's done it at a much bigger magnified reach, right? Like he might not be as rich as maybe he is rich as what Pablo Escobar was, right? We don't know, but like the ruthlessness and him enjoying sports. And remember like the stories, if you watch Narcos, like he would bring in the soccer stars to come and play while he was in prison, the prison that he built for himself, that type of thing, right? And if I think I would think like he would be doing something like that, right, with his love for sports and especially for fighting. And it's just that whole region is just mystery for a lot of us, right? For a lot of us that never been there. And I think I don't know. It's confusing. It's hard because I'm not well educated about him, right? And I know that he's known for work. And I think YouTube blocked all of his like promotions. Like, is that true? Did that actually happen? Because someone was telling me that they blocked like all of his like activities on YouTube, like anything that's associated with him, like ACA or those promotions. Is that true?
I believe so, yeah. Because that was part of the sanctions levied against him. Was that you had sanctions levied against him specifically, where especially if he had a high controlling financial interest, those promotions were either completely embargoed from the U.S. or were heavily fined and reduced in terms of their abilities in terms of what they could do in the U.S. So I think that stuff is blocked. I'm not 100% on that, but I wouldn't be shocked with all the sanctions because I know ACA got hit by the sanctions because of Kadyrov's involvement in it.
Well, it seemed like it worked because Hamzat is not retired anymore. That was like the shortest retirement. But in some ways, I kind of think that it was kind of I don't know for sure because I know he's sick and he's probably frustrated, but a lot of people are starting to forget about him because he's not fighting, right? So he's just sitting on the sidelines. And in fighting, no matter who you are, if you don't fight, people are gonna forget about you. And it was his way as a publicity stunt to kind of get people to write about him and get him in the news again in the cycle and have other fighters be asked about, oh, what do you think about Hamzat's retirement? Because those are the questions that will come out eventually, especially to the top, 5, 10 in the rankings in the welterweight division. And it could be that too. I don't know for sure, but we know for sure that now he's going to come back and fight. Dana White was like denying that immediately. When that news came out, he was like, "Nah, what are you talking about? Like he's fighting in June." So, yeah, so it was weird. Let's get into some questions. Tristan, he said, the real question is, how did Azaitar get UFC to reverse the decision? I think we kind of got into that a little bit earlier. Was it him? I don't think it was him. I think it was mostly his manager. His manager is a convincing man. So, and he has great ties with the UFC. If you look at his long list of clients, he has some power. So, and it seems like Azaitar has some power too, because if he wasn't so powerful, his manager wouldn't probably push for him as hard, right? In reality, right? In reality, if you don't have that juice, then there's no squeeze, right? You just don't have it. So,
Yeah.
Eddie the Blasian, what's up, Eddie? Speaking of location, how do you guys feel about these fighters having to fight super early in the morning? I was actually speaking with Kama Worthy yesterday, and I got an interview coming with him soon. And I made the mistake of thinking that he fought on Fight Island his last fight, and he's like, "No, I didn't fight on Fight Island," because he's the one who fought Ottman the last fight, right? And he got knocked out. And he's like, no, I fought in Vegas. And he said he will never go to Fight Island. He said he will never go there because of this reason. I don't want to fight at 2 a.m. in the morning. That's something. And I feel like this is a huge, huge factor, right? In some of the performances fighters have had on Fight Island, right? Like Paulo Costa brought it up. He couldn't sleep and he had to wake up at 5 a.m. to fight at 9 a.m. or whatever. And he used the wine excuse. Of course, you don't want to hear those excuses, but it could be legit. What do you think? Do you think that a lot of these results on Fight Island, what percentage do you think has to do with like fighters not being able to get adjusted to the time difference?
I think it's tough because, jet lag and, time difference affects everyone differently, right? When I was younger, much younger, I traveled to Australia for a year. And when I flew from LA to Sydney, I was out of it for a week, easy. I also knew several other people that had come from LA or the US to Sydney that were good immediately or were good within a day. I knew one person that took them like a week and a half, 2 weeks to adjust. So I think, it's one of those things where not only do you have that, jet lag part of getting into a new, daylight and nighttime type thing, but then you are fighting at these crazy times because you need to, put on a show when the majority of the audience is awake, or the target audience in this case, which is usually the US. And it's got to be crazy to fight at 3 a.m. in the morning. That I think plays a big factor in some of these fights, because I know that, if I tried to do anything at 3 a.m. in the morning when I was all discombobulated, I'm probably not going to do it as well as I could if I was on normal time, right? But depending on how each person adapts to that, I think it makes I think it could have made a difference in a lot of ways. I don't know that it affected any fight to the point where I would say, oh, this person would definitely beat or win if they had not been on Fight Island, or vice versa. But there's no way it doesn't affect the fighters in some form of mentality, because it'd be crazy not to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You gotta think about how, they're dealing with the jet lag, and on top of that, they need to mentally prepare themselves for a fight which they're entering, and on top of that, they gotta do all the media stuff. on for a whole day. And I just think it's a lot of stuff to be putting on the fighter with the jet lag. I know whenever I, go back to the UK or I come here to Korea, it takes me at least a week or two to actually, get used to the time. So, for the fighters, I can't imagine how difficult that might be for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, it should be. It should be difficult to get used to it. And like you said, Patrick, it does affect everybody differently. Some people, it has no effect on them. They can fight anytime. And then imagine the fighters that are kind of notorious slow starters, right? Then they become a much slower starter. So if you compete against a guy that's a fast starter and he comes in, bum rushes you, and then I wonder what the statistics are of like quick finishes, like first round finishes on Fight Island. That's something that I'm interested in. I would like to see like what the numbers are on that, because I think we've seen a lot of them on Fight Island. I don't know if it's comparable to Las Vegas, because Fight Island has the large cage, and then Las Vegas has the small cage, right? And man, how big of a factor is that going to be this weekend with some of these matchups, like Amanda versus Megan, what is it, Peter Yan versus Sterling, and then the main event, right, Jan Blachowicz versus Israel, because I know Israel's the type of guy that likes the bigger cage because he can move around, he has more room to just shake it out and just work, right, compared to like Jan Blachowicz. I don't think he cares about the larger cage. I think he prefers the smaller cage because he's a guy that rushes forward and is aggressive. And that's a part of me. That's why I'm kind of picking, or not kind of, I am picking Jan Blachowicz to win that fight because of that reason. The aggressiveness, the smaller cage, and the power that he carries, right? And we don't know. We haven't seen Israel get hit with that type of power in the UFC. Can he take it? Because he was rocked by Kelvin Gastelum, and Kelvin Gastelum got some power, but that's a welterweight moving up to middleweight type of power, right?
Yeah.
But now it's a light heavyweight, a real light heavyweight, a guy that could probably fight at heavyweight. It's power, and we've seen what that happens, right? So I don't know, but Israel, he's like one of the greatest, like he is probably the greatest or one of the greatest strikers of all time. We almost forget about Anderson Silva, how great he was, right? Because Israel's in front of our face right now. Let's get into that right there. That kind of segues well, Patrick. Like Israel Adesanya right now compared to Anderson Silva in his prime, what they're able to do, who would you rate higher at this moment?
Ooh, that is tough. It's hard because I think a big part of sports in general, right? Not just MMA, but all sports in general, is that as time goes on, sports evolve and the competitors in said sports continually, get better and better. Like if you look at the heavyweight guys now and you look at, say, Tank Abbott in his prime, right? And the way that he used to fight, or some of these brawlers, they might get picked apart in today's world just because the sport has evolved to that point. And I think with that in mind, Anderson Silva's run was legendary, and his antics and his ability, the Forrest Griffin, right? The Matrix stuff is insane. But I don't know if he could have done that if prime Anderson Silva was here today in today's world. Adesanya, I think, is the closest we've seen to that, because even Adesanya is not doing as flashy, Matrix style moves like the Forrest Griffin sequence today, but I don't know that he necessarily can. I don't think that's his fault. I think that's because the fighters have just evolved now to a point where coaching has gotten better. There's more money in it, so people have the ability to do it full time and train for it. I think that it's close, but I would lean Adesanya. But the fanboy in me also is saying, I mean, it's Anderson Silva all day. My bias is for Silva is so great. So I'm going to lean Adesanya for this, but I'm going to put him about even. Both incredible strikers and just so good at what they do.
Now, Kenny, you know yourself watching Adesanya's rise through the ranks and him becoming champion. What are your thoughts on just his overall body of work right now heading into 259? Do you think he's on his way to just surpassing every single striker? Let's look at striker in MMA in the UFC. Do you think like he can be the greatest, or is he the greatest right now that you've seen?
I wouldn't say he's the greatest right now, but he's definitely on the way. I saw an interview of him the other day where he said it's not about the belts, but it's about, for him, it's more about him beating all these other type great fighters to finally put himself, at the top and call himself the great. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he beats Jan. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually goes for that third belt at heavyweight, because there's his rival with John Jones, and his body of work is amazing. He's beat Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum, Paulo Costa, all these great guys who I think was a tougher competition than what Anderson Silva fought back in the day. No disrespect to Anderson Silva, he was an amazing striker in himself, but I think Adesanya would beat all the guys that Anderson Silva beat back in the day, but in a better fashion. Because as you said, Patrick, the sport has moved on. The MMA athletes, they're just so much quicker and so much more athletic. And yeah, Adesanya, I think definitely he's going to be chasing greatness, every time he, beats someone.
When you look at like, I'm just looking at to the like when you get to the point where people hate you and they want you to lose, right? That's the point that you want to get at as a fighter, right? That's everybody,
Floyd
right?
Mayweather.
Floyd Mayweather
Yeah.
created that
Yep.
that niche, right? And I think before that, Muhammad Ali was that guy, right? Like he was so great and so dominant that when he became too dominant, a lot of people didn't want him to win. A lot of people wanted him to lose, and Anderson Silva got to that point. Adesanya is getting to that point. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's getting to the point. One thing that separates Adesanya from Anderson Silva is that Adesanya can speak English and he can promote himself much better. And if you look at it, look at the Puma deal. You know what I mean? Like that Puma deal is a major step. I don't think just for Adesanya, but I think it's a major step for mixed martial arts and its athletes in general, right? We did have the Nike deals back in the day, right? With Anderson Silva, he had Burger King, but it wasn't to the magnitude of Adesanya. It seems like Adesanya is mostly like an international deal. Like he's like promoting it around the world. Anderson, it seems like it's just a Brazilian thing, right? In Brazil, JDS had the Nike deal too. John Jones had it until he got caught doing some illegal activities. John Jones was on the path, right? He had Gatorade, I believe. Man, all of that disappeared after the car accident. I think it was the car accident, right? So going back to Anderson Silva had this thing, right? When you saw him fight, you knew that he was great, but then he shocked you. Like Adesanya hasn't done that yet, but I think he has that chance this weekend. He has that chance this weekend to shock people. Even though everybody thinks he's the favorite, if he can go in there and let's say flying triangles like Blachowicz, right? Or he just does a spinning elbow knockout on Blachowicz, something like that, something insane like we would never expect from him. That would put him over the top. And of course, he will hold two belts simultaneously, which makes him another bracket compared to everybody else. But when you look at his middleweight run, you mentioned Kelvin Gastelum, a welterweight that went up to middleweight. You mentioned Robert Whittaker, a welterweight that went up to middleweight. Well, who was a true middleweight? Like Paulo Costa, true middleweight, but Paulo Costa's coming up with like 50 million excuses of why he lost the fight, and it kind of like taints it a little bit. But I don't know. It's hard to say right now, but I'm with Patrick, man. I'm still like Anderson Silva, man. That guy was just doing some things that you'll never get to see again. And like you said, the competition is tougher, but the skill sets are better even for every other athlete, right? So if he's able to do it, he should be doing it against the guys that are out right now, right? Because his level is up there.
I think Anderson Silva was a lot more ahead of his time than Adesanya is in his time, in a sense. So I think that's one of the reasons why Anderson Silva looks so amazing against Forrest Griffin, because he was just on a matrix level compared to these other guys, But yeah, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, he was in the Matrix, and Adesanya, he's a phenomenal athlete. Jan Blachowicz, phenomenal athlete too, and man, he's the underdog again, and everybody's gonna pick against him.
He's
And what's
always
gonna
the
happen?
underdog.
So it's gonna be an incredible fight. I'm just picking Blachowicz just because that's who I think is gonna win. Do I want Blachowicz to win? No, it's just that's who I think is gonna win. There's a difference. I think a lot of people get misconstrued, right? About when you make picks, it's like, oh, you want that guy to. No, I think Blachowicz is gonna win. Everybody else that did that media video thing for Fightful, they all picked Adesanya. I'm the only one that picked Blachowicz. Like, I look like the town idiot, right? But we'll find out on Saturday night if I am the town idiot, right? Anyways, yeah, it's just it's an exciting week this week, right? With 259 going on, but let's get into some of these other questions. Let's see this one. Okay, so I wonder if Moreno versus Figueiredo rematch will be on Fight Island in June. Do you think that even makes a difference, like, for this fight? What did you think about the first fight, Patrick?
So I love the first fight. I mean, I thought the first fight was amazing and would have been fight of the year had we not had Joanna versus Wei Li back before all this craziness started. I mean, it was a phenomenal fight, great back and forth. The only thing that really sucked was the foul. But I kind of am semi-happy it happened because now we get to see it again, which this is, I think, the most exciting fight to make it flyweight again. And I'm very excited about it, though I will say I think it does make a difference whether it's at Fight Island or not because of a couple things, right? One, we talked about the time differences again, right? And all of that. I think that'll play a factor into, if you're fighting at Fight Island at a ridiculous 3 a.m. in the morning versus if you're in the States and you're fighting at what you're more accustomed to. But the other thing is, COVID-19 is still very much ravaging a lot of the UFC cards, right? Last week, how many things were canceled last week? I think it was 3 or 4, one last minute, like day of, Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder, because one of her cornermen tested positive. So, I hope it's on Fight Island because they seem to have a much better rate of making sure that, there are no surprises come fight day or the day before fight day. I am actually nervous about this card coming up. That I'm dreading opening up, one of the news sites the next morning and saying, oh, well, Adesanya versus Blachowicz is off because a cornerman tested positive or something like that. I think Fight Island is the safer bet if you want to preserve a fight. I think that's part of the reason they did McGregor-Poirier there, that and the fans, but, I think that's a huge part of it too. So I think I would love to see it on Fight Island. If it's not, then it's not, but we'll see what happens there. Because 256 was not on Fight Island, right?
I don't think
Is that
so.
Okay? So yeah, so I mean, I'm as long as everybody makes it to the cage, I'm cool with where it is forever, or each place, wherever you want to have it, go for it. But I don't know. I'd prefer Fight Island just because that's probably a little less likely to get canceled.
Yeah, it's just you heard like months ago about the protocol that the UFC has. Like, once fighters arrive, they get tested, they go into 48-hour quarantine, the results come back, and then they're free to go anywhere they want. Because if you've seen the embeddeds, they're just going wherever they want. They're outside running in the street, and this is a city, an open city in the US where there's like 50 million cases a week, right? Like, it's insane what's going on. And one thing that I noticed on that this week's embedded, right, when City Kickboxing arrived, Eugene had all the fighters and the coaches in a circle, and he said, today we start our lockdown. We are in quarantine. Not after we get out of 48-hour quarantine, you can just run around the city. We are in quarantine. And I think a lot of coaches should be doing that with their fighters, man. Like, you don't want to risk going out there and getting sick. And especially in New Zealand, he said that there was like 4 cases before they left. So the New Zealand is going back on lockdown, and they were having like shows with like 20,000 people, no masks. So they were doing it right. But then once the cases come in, they shut it down. And that's what I think Eugene, the head coach of City Kickboxing, he's worried about. And also, you don't want to get your fight canceled because you or your corner tested positive. Imagine that. You're the fighter and your corner goes out and runs around the city and gets COVID, and the day before you get tested, and the results come back and you can't fight because one of your teammates or somebody was acting wild, right? So I think Eugene is doing a good thing right there by just telling his team, like, you guys are on lockdown, you guys cannot leave. The farthest you can go is the parking lot, right? But then the people that are leaving and coming back, you're running into them in the hallways. You don't know what's gonna happen with that either, man. So it's I don't know why they're not just doing what they did on Fight Island in Las Vegas and just controlling the environment, right? Does that confuse you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It's tough because, Dana White has not made it a secret that he doesn't really care much for the protocols, right? He doesn't really care at all for the protocols. He doesn't want to wear a mask. He doesn't wear a mask, ring cage side. That he doesn't want to deal with any of this. And so, despite the fact that Fight Island is far more successful in preventing like last minute cancellations, I think he doesn't want to deal with the infrastructure you'd have to put in place. You'd have to rent out an entire hotel, probably not just your floors. You'd have to make sure that no one else is in the hotel. You'd have to have lockdowns. You'd have to pay people to monitor different areas to make sure nobody's going in places they're not supposed to. It's a much bigger undertaking, and it would come out of the UFC's pocket, and the president of the company doesn't really care much for the protocols. So it is what it is. But as you mentioned, I can't imagine. It's very smart of Eugene Behrman to do this, because I can't imagine going through a fight camp, especially, what Adesanya is doing, for a giant chance at a two belts to really get your name out there and really go over the top, to then stand on, if you beat Jan, you get to stand on a podium and shout for John Jones all day, which is by far the biggest fight of his career / money fight that Adesanya can get. And for you to risk that because you want to go hang out in Las Vegas for a couple days and you might test positive even if you're asymptomatic, it's crazy to me. But this is the world we live in, man. In the U.S. here, again, I'm in Texas. The governor just lifted the mask mandate and opened up everything to 100%. It's crazy. It makes no sense. But that's the type of mentality we have over here. And I mean, when it comes down to it, Adesanya and Jan and every other fighter, if I were them, even if you weren't a big fan of the protocols and you were like, whatever, I would be locked down for sure, because I don't want to not get paid after going through a grueling camp because somebody, not even me necessarily, but somebody tested positive.
Yeah, and if you watch the embedded, Jan is out there mountain biking in the middle of the desert in Las Vegas, so you know that they're not quarantining at all, which it kind of worries me a little bit, you know what I mean, that they don't just force it on themselves. But Eugene, a guy, why do you think City Kickboxing is where they're at? He's just a guy that's ahead of his time. He knows what to do. He knows that there's chances that you can take and there's chances you cannot take, and he's doing the right thing with the team. Now, Kenny, this is a question for you. How many bags would you sneak in Las Vegas? Think about how many bags Ottman has in his room right now. How many bags? What would be in your bag?
What would be in my bag?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know, man. Like, whatever.
No, but you have to sneak it in. But in Vegas, you don't have to sneak anything in because it's open. Like, you can leave and go. Like, you can bring in a bag every 15 minutes.
Man, I would take every bag that I could take in. Any bag that I could take in. If there's no restriction on that, then yeah. Azaitar, he should have probably fought in Vegas, not in Fight Island.
Yeah, is this room full of potatoes right now? That's what I envision. Like, Ottman's room is just full of potatoes, and he has like a potato chef. We got mashed potatoes, French fries.
Where did this potatoes thing come out from?
I don't know. I think it was just Ali, someone asking Ali about it, and then he just giving a joke answer. You know what I mean? Just playing around because nobody really wants to reveal what's in the bag. So, but anyways, yeah, he's in Vegas. There's no bag controversy, and I'm just hoping that there's no fights canceled because of this. Because you could get those false negatives, and those false negatives they're gonna take it seriously and say, hey, Henry Gracie. He was supposed to fly to Fight Island with Brian Ortega for the fight against the Korean Zombie, and he got a false negative, and then he couldn't fly. You know what I mean? Like they take that stuff seriously. But in Vegas, it just seems like whatever. Like false negative. Okay, we'll cancel the fight, but just get out of here and leave. You know what I mean? Like they're just terrible stories with that. So
You mean
hopefully
false positive?
Oh yeah, false positive. Sorry.
Yeah, I was
False positive. Yeah, false positive. But anyways, let's get to the another question. It's with pertaining to Israel. It says, seeing in a skinny 200-pound is Adesanya at a heavyweight weigh-in will be a trip, but you guys forget Dan Henderson fought at heavyweight and weighed in at 204, 205, 206, something like that against Fedor, and look what he did to Fedor in that fight.
Oh wow!
Just destroyed him. So it's not that out of the realm of possibility that he weighs in at 205, 206 and fights John Jones. If he can go in there, yeah.
Oh, didn't Izzy fight at heavyweight in kickboxing?
Yeah, he did. So it's no big deal, you know what I mean?
So yeah, that's
how much.
And people are thinking like it never happened before. You know what I mean? Like people are like, oh, if it did happen in the UFC, it never happened. You know what I mean? Like that's like some of the people's ideologies on that. But yeah, he did. But it's I think Izzy's the type of guy, if he can go in there against Blachowicz and put him out and dominantly, or just win the fight and win the belt, I don't think he would even gain weight to go to heavyweight. You know what I mean? Like he'll feel confident enough. And I like how the coaching staff is taking this fight too. They're like, this is a serious danger. You know what I mean? Like they're talking about the fight, the realities of this fight. But it is what it is. We got MD, man. He's back. I got $2,000 parlay on Israel, Peter Yan, Islam, and Brady.
Ooh.
Wow. That's a lot of money right there. Let's see what MD says. Is Sean Brady a lock, or do you think the Celtic kid being overlooked? What do you think, Patrick? Jake Matthews?
I mean, Jake Matthews is very good, but I don't know. Because Brady, I don't know that he's a lock, but I would favor him. If I had to bet money on this fight, I would go with Brady. But that's a good question, because the thing about Jake Matthews is he has looked like, you've almost done a double take and being like, what is he doing? And he's getting like destroyed. And then he's looked phenomenal against high level guys. He's one of those fighters that is very hot and cold, it seems. And I feel like Brady is consistent, I believe undefeated, right? Or has, yeah. And has just looked good. I would definitely lean Brady here, but I wouldn't call it a lock. I mean, Jake Matthews, you never want to, count Jake Matthews out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to overlook Jake Matthews because of his last fight against Diego Sanchez. You know, he fights to the level of his competition, it seems like. And if he does fight to the level of Sean Brady, we're going to see an incredible fight. And Sean Brady is a guy that I believe Eddie Alvarez trains with a lot. And Eddie Alvarez is saying that he's the next kid. But it's his teammate. You know what I mean? Every teammate's going to say that. I think Sean Brady's a phenomenal talent. And he does, if he can't get past Jake Matthews, then maybe he's not the talent that we thought he was, right? That's what you got to look at it as, because it's a big test, and he's still young in his career, so even if he wins, even if he loses, he still has a bright future. A lot of people commenting on the Peter Yan bet, that Peter Yan pick is risky. Peter Yan is not a risk pick. All these casuals are gonna see Peter Yan literally murder Aljo. I like this fight so much because people are split on this, right? Like extremely split on this, and a lot of people are picking Aljo because of his resume. They look at the resume, who he has fought, what he has gone through to get to this point in his career, and the size. They feel like he's going to be much bigger than Peter Yan. Mm-hmm. And then they look at Peter Yan and say, oh, he's only beat up Jose Aldo, only beat up Jose Aldo. Only beat up like I'm telling you, man, like Jose Aldo will beat a lot of the guys in that bantamweight division. He just hasn't got a chance to get his hands on them, right? And I hope he does. I hope he gets a couple more fights against some of these top guys, because I think Jose Aldo will sneak into that title picture again somehow, some way. Doesn't seem like he's done yet. So, but yeah, Peter Yan, he beat Uriah Faber. People are like, oh, Uriah Faber was over the hill. and John Dodson. So if you look at resumes, if you compare it, then you're gonna see Aljo being the favorite going into this fight, right? But man, I don't know, the pace and the style of Peter Yan is just incredible. Just like how he gets better every round. When's the last fighter you saw that from? Like a championship caliber fighter that can start a fight and just get better every single round and just continue. And that's why he gets those late finishes. Have you seen that before, Patrick?
I mean, the person that comes to mind most when you're talking about that is Max Holloway, right? Like Max Holloway just consistently gets better and better as the fight goes on. If you get into a fourth or fifth round, Max Holloway, you're generally in trouble. The only person we've seen really be able to kind of negate that was Volkanovski. But even then, their last fight, you know, to see the jump Max Holloway made from their first fight to their second fight is nuts. I mean, that guy just keeps getting better and better and better. And yeah, Jan, I think, is similar. I mean, I pegged him as being the bantamweight champion way back in the day when I think he had just made his debut. I'm trying to remember who that was against, but it was he looked so good. He is relentless. His pressure is insane, and he has gotten rocked once, I believe, in the Dodson fight. Yeah. But even then, he recovered so fast and just kept walking through shots, and for the majority of that time, he got hit once, got rocked, but then just went on autopilot. Never really stopped the pressure. Barely stopped the pressure the entire time. I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue for Aljo. I think it's a great matchup, but at the same time, I would lean Jan in this fight just because of how relentless he is and how much better he gets in between fights. The leaps and bounds he's making between each fight is nuts. What he did to Aldo was insane. I don't care if you want to say, oh, Aldo's over the hill. He's not. He's still very much, I think he's 32. He's war tested, but he's still very, very good. A lot of people, including myself, had him beating Moraes in the official decision, although it was close. I mean, I think people are overlooking Jan in a huge way, and I think it's because of what you said in terms of the reach advantage and the resume. I think this is going to be an awesome fight for as long as it lasts, and I hope it goes the full 5 rounds and is war, honestly.
It all depends on the wrestling, right? People are saying that Aljo will go in there and utilize his wrestling. His wrestling is much more high caliber than Peter Yan, and I feel like Peter Yan just never had to use his wrestling. The dude has serious scrambles, and I feel like that's going to be the key in getting out of positions against Aljo if it does go to the ground. And I'm interested to see, once Aljo attempts to take him to the ground, if it just doesn't work, what's the game plan after that? There's got to be plan B, plan C, plan D, right? We know Peter Yan doesn't have a plan. He just goes in there and his smash, right? That's his motto. He just goes in there, pressures, and smashes guys, right? That's breaks them down bit by bit until they're just pieces, and that's what Peter Yan does. So Eddie the Blasian says, does Aljamain not have a sub threat? He definitely has a sub threat. I think the sub threat will be in the beginning of the fight, just like in the Sandhagen fight, right? And if you can't get him down, and once they get too slippery, I don't think that I think the sub threat gets, the percentage of the sub coming is going to dwindle down to nothing pretty much as the fight goes. And then next, Peter Yan's taking over. And yeah, man, the guy is just a machine. Like his countdown that they did is probably one of the best countdowns I've ever seen. The way that they filmed it in Siberia, where like he's in the middle of a frozen pond or something, and he's like running down the woods, and it's straight up like some like Rocky type movie like countdown. It's so different from Aljamain's side of the countdown. But anyways, it's gonna be an incredible fight no matter what happens. I think we're gonna be entertained, and we're gonna do it. Now, before we move on to some more comments and questions, I want to get into the UFC media deal that they have with Migu Video, right, in China. And I think that this is a very interesting deal because, man, the Chinese market, if you haven't watched Patrick's, Fight Business podcast, you got to go watch it. He breaks it down, but I wanted to have him talking about that. And what do you think, man? What do you think is the future of of China and what they're trying to produce, especially with the COVID, pandemic going on right now. It's a very interesting time to make money, especially for the UFC, and they're making money in China during the COVID era, where the pandemic, I don't even know if it's still going on, if it's like they have it all settled. I'm pretty sure there's probably breakouts all over the place. We just don't know about it. But yeah, what is the impact of that on the whole Chinese market? Like, do you believe the numbers, number one?
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of those things where China from the get-go on this, right, was very adamant about locking down, making sure that, when cities did have an outbreak, they locked things down big time, right? That's what we were seeing with Wuhan and all these other outbreak cities. They didn't lock down the entire country. They just locked down wherever there was an outbreak, and they did, contact tracing and all of that stuff to really silo this as much as possible. And now they're, I believe, in a state where, again, they kind of go back to business as normal. And then if there are cases, they initiate a snap lockdown in the region and kind of, different restrictions based on region, all of that type of deal. So kind of similar to what New Zealand's doing, but instead where New Zealand locks down the whole country because of the way it is. In China, I believe it's much more like regions are getting locked down, and they're doing testing nonstop, that type of thing. Although, again, we won't know for sure. I'm not an expert on this either, so I could be wrong there. But I think this deal with Migu Mobile is a long time coming, and something the UFC is built towards, for at least a good 6-7 years. And a big part of that is, right, when you look at emerging markets for new customer acquisition, the China, of course, is on everybody's list, not just MMA, but every industry, as it's, boomed and come into, its own, right? I lived in China for a year when I was a kid. I lived in Nanjing in 1998, I believe it was, 97 or 98. And it was nothing about what it looks like now. The pictures I see now it used to be there were only taxis. Everybody rode a bicycle everywhere. The only thing on the roads were taxis or buses. And, $1 was worth 8 Chinese dollars. And, you could kind of get pretty much whatever you want if you had American currency and you were going around there. And that was only, 20 some years ago. Now we're at a point where China has really caught up and grown to where they have a lot of consumers. They have people with spending power now, are able to go out there and buy luxuries that wasn't possible before. And the UFC, that's a prime market for them. That it always has been, and they've known this for years. When they started with the performance institutes, and you had the main one in Vegas and then the first one opening in Shanghai, that was on purpose. There was a reason that Weili Zhang got the title opportunity in China when, by all accounts, she probably hadn't earned it meritocratically. She had only beat Tisha Torres as a ranked fighter. Other than that, she hadn't gone through any of the top, 3 or 4 women to get that shot. But not only did she get that title shot, she got it in China. And once that happened, the UFC immediately was trying to renegotiate their media rights deal with the CCP, I believe it was over there at the time. And, this is a culmination of that. This is their media rights deal being renegotiated, now going through Migu Mobile. I don't know how much money they're getting, but it's got to be more than 50 million. I'm going to guess 100 because that's what they were aiming for originally when Weili won the belt. So they have staked out China's, as their territory. They've signed a lot of, Chinese fighters. You've got, the Leech coming into his own with that huge knockout over Ponzinibbio. He's going to be pushed, I'm sure. They've had some recent signings as well of new up-and-coming Chinese athletes. That's going to be a market they keep tapping over and over, similar to how they're going to keep tapping Russia and the Middle East. Those are the other 2 markets that they're really going in hard for there. Might be part of the reason that Azaitar got back into the promotion. But this was years in the making. This didn't happen overnight. It wasn't, oh, hey, we happened to get a Chinese champion that put on some amazing fights, and we happened to, build a performance center here, and it just all worked out. This was careful planning by the UFC, and it's paying off dividends for him.
Yeah, it is. It is paying off. I was at Shenzhen for that show, and yeah, I didn't realize like how much of a push that even the Leech, Leech has like billboards for Monster Energy drink in China. Like I don't think people will realize that. Like he is the face of Monster Energy drink. I don't. People wouldn't even think that. They would just think like, what? The Leech? He's just the guy that goes out there and just bangs and swangs against everybody, right? So yeah, like the Leech is there, and then they got a bunch of prospects, at the PI that they're gonna push. They've already signed a couple of them. They're gonna make their debuts in the next couple of months. I think a lot of them will probably make a debut on the 24th of April. I think they already mentioned one of the prospects, and then now the names are gonna be tougher. You know what I mean? The names, some of them are just like, what? I don't know. How do you say that, right? Like it's gonna be tough, even for me. I'm not Chinese, so I'm not a professional name speaker. So, anyways, yeah. So with that, and it seems like they want to go into Russia. You mentioned that earlier. The Middle East, it seems like they're pumping it right now because they have some deals going on with like UAE Warriors. I think that they're going to be on Fight Pass now, and Habib's Eagle Fighting Championship, right? They're doing a lot of collaborations with the Middle Eastern promotions. I think Habib is going to end up becoming like like Nogueira, like Big Nog, how his role is in Brazil for the UFC. Like he's like their ambassador. I think Habib will end up being that guy for the UFC in Russia, in the Middle East. The Muslim world is massive, right? And they're massive following. That's why Habib is as big as he is, right? Because of that reason. And I think he's gonna be. That's why, the Dana White wants to keep pushing him to come back. You talked about it in the video. I refer to the video. Go in there and watch it. Go over there on the Body Lock channel and watch that. But China, man, it's just one thing about Russia and like that region. It's a little bit more open, right? You can kind of research stuff over there. But with China, it's not. It's much more difficult, right? Have you found that? Like it's much more difficult to find information on things?
Yeah, I mean they lock down things pretty hard over there. It's they are notorious too for censoring certain things. They don't have really a Twitter. They have Weibo, right, which is monitored, and there are stories about people being picked up from things that they typed in messages on Weibo, which is interesting. And you had a perfect example of some of the censorship that they impose on other sports is what happened with the Houston Rockets and everything that happened with Hong Kong, right? That was a huge deal. They are very locked down. They censor things. You have to give them the right product, otherwise they will not show it. And I think that's something, in terms of trying to find research on them, we're going to find all of the research that they want us to know. If there's something else going on in the background there, it's going to be much harder to uncover. And I pretty much found, stories and things where it comes from verified sources and it's information that makes sense that they would want public, but you're not talking about, as much, especially in the business world, you don't get a lot of information that is transparent. Lucan Coffee, I think, is the biggest example of this, right? Where a lot of people were talking about this was going to take on Starbucks, this was going to be a whole thing, and then it comes out that they've been kind of embezzling, and they're now bankrupt and gone completely. But there was information that some transparency laws and freedoms that we have in other countries, or the more openness as you're talking about, may have caught on to that a little bit sooner. In this case, I had only heard good things about Lucan Coffee until suddenly it was all unraveled. There was no lead up into, hey, this looks strange, or hey, what's going on here? Those are things that wouldn't fly in part of other parts of the world. So it's a different world in and of itself, especially with business and stuff like we're talking about in China. And there's not really much we could do about it except try and find what we can. And that's just going to have to be how it is.
Yeah, it's they must have the right people in place on on the ground in China to where they getting these deals done properly. Because from what I heard from people that I know personally that have done business in China, if you don't have a Chinese representative, like a strong, powerful Chinese representative, it's hard to get anything done, and you'll probably end up going in circles for a long time, especially with business. So the UFC is doing things right. They're growing the sport, and that's all we can ask for, right? Even though there is a limited amount of transparency, but that's what China does. You know what I mean? They're just limited amount of transparency, right? So we just got to take it as it is. We can't. I want to go to China. You know, if they're having shows, like they said, they're going to put on like a couple of shows a year in China. Of course, I want to go there, cover the shows. If they're going to have in Singapore, I want to go to Singapore, right? China, is it harder to get in those? Yes, because you have to get a visa, and even for myself, I have to get a visa to get in, enter the country, and you have to pay extra for that, and go through some hoops, right? You still got. Let me tell you the visa process. I don't know. You went to China when you were a kid, but right now, recently, I have to tell them where I'm going every day of my trip,
Wow.
where I'm gonna be every day of my trip, on before I apply for my visa. So it's I hope that changes, you know what I mean? But I doubt it will. These guys are stuck in their ways. You know, like how old it's like your grandfather. Your grandfather is not going to change. So you just got to go with the flow, you know, and whatever he wants, you just got to go with it. And even though you don't like it, you just got to let it go and see what happens. Because you don't want him to die, right? So, anyways, let's see WMMA scene. We got what we got here. You need a corporate sponsor in China, along with Chinese office, and a certain percentage of staff that belong to the CCP. So CCP, Chinese something party, most likely, right? Chinese Communist Party, right? Most likely, right? Yeah. So, anyways, like I thought that when I heard the news, and I was like, man, this is a big deal, especially for these young Chinese fighters, I think, more than anybody, because they're going to get the exposure that kind of Zhang Wei Li is the one who cracked the doors open for them, you know, and they should pay respect to her a lot of respect to her. And she took every opportunity the UFC gave her, because at the end of the day, you have to win. At the end of the day, they could give you a 50 million opportunities. We've seen that with many fighters, right? They're getting opportunity after opportunity and then just lose. And then you can't do anything when you're a loser, right? And I think we're seeing that with Darren Till for some reason. I don't know why. He's the guy that's like the face of the UK, but he gets all these opportunities, but he just doesn't perform. And it kind of fizzles out. And now they're going to have to go to the next guy for the UK. I don't know who that would be, but it's going to eventually happen. And it's going to happen in China too. Zhang Wei Li's not going to be winning forever. So they're going to have to go to the next person, which is Yan Jianan. She might take over the division. And then you got Song Yadong. You got the Leech. You know, you got a bunch of others coming up. But one thing that's unique is that China has a lot of good female fighters that we have not seen get signed in the UFC. And I think a lot of these fighters are going to get picked up soon. And we're going to see them on the Contender Series Asia. And you're going to be surprised by the talent. And people are going to be worried, man, about the Chinese girls coming in. We already have two of them, you know, representing, but man, just it's going to be insane, right? The next 5 years, the competition level of like Africa, of China, and we already have Russia and Brazil, you know, doing their thing. But I think Africa and China are the next two big markets where they're going to produce some major superstars in this sport. And you know, look at Rung. Dude had like 1 or 2 fights now. He's a second fight, and he's already does incredible numbers. And you're thinking like, where does these numbers come from? You know, it's almost like Aung San, you know, in Myanmar. You know what I mean? Like he's like Michael Jackson over there. Like he can't even walk down the street without people like chasing after him. And I think Rung's getting to that level. One Championship has done a great job of like scouting these types of fighters, right? Like, you know, they signed Buchecha, you know, who's like probably one of the greatest jiu-jitsu players of all time. He's going to fight soon. He's going to make his debut. They got Amir Alakbari or whatever his name is from Iran. He's a guy that pretty much is untouchable with most promotions, but One Championship signed him. They're doing a good job of just picking up. And this leads to my what happened today, the news of JDS and Overeem getting cut by the UFC. Where do you see them going? You know, what are the possibilities of a JDS or Overeem? I think Overeem is in a little bit better position in his career compared to the JDS, but Where do you see them? Do you see them fitting well in Bellator? Maybe go to one championship and fight some of the younger guys coming up, because they could kind of give them good matchups, right? I don't think Bellator would do that. I think Bellator would throw them in with guys that are just super dangerous, whereas one championship could give them like some good fights, but not something too dangerous. Where do you see the fit?
So with JDS, I honestly think it's going to end up being boxing. He's talked about wanting to do boxing forever. Even in his post today where he said, thanks to the UFC, he had a boxing glove, which, I mean, I know they don't necessarily have MMA gloves, but still, he's talked about boxing for a while, and that's something that Mark Hunt went on to do, even though it was a losing effort. I think JDS would kind of prefer that. So I imagine we might actually see him move over to boxing for a bit. If he were to continue to do MMA, Bellator is a possibility, but Bellator isn't really looking to sign some of the older fighters like they used to. Like, they picked up Anthony Johnson and Romero, which made sense, but Anthony Johnson and Romero still have some life in them left to give, whereas JDS at this point, I think it's going to be hard to see him as getting a title run right now in any promotion, right? With Overeem, I like that, Dylan's out there, shout out to him, saying Overeem in one. I think that would be a good fit. I honestly think, based on where, if you look at Overeem saying in the lead up to his past several fights, he wanted one more title run, right? That was the whole thing, is I'm going to keep fighting and I'm going to get another title run. That's not really possible anymore. So if you're looking at a place where he could go and like retire and ride off into the sunset, one is a solid option, but I really like Ryzen. I think that makes a lot of sense, where, that's a place you could see him go and go back to his roots in Japan with all of his history and legacy that he has over there, and, have some good matchups, whether that be in a tournament or be in just, a couple of good fights to, give him a heavyweight belt of some sort, or an open weight belt. That makes a lot of sense to me, especially given Overeem's career and what he said leading up to all this stuff of where he wants to be. I don't think he has more than one or two fights left in him. If you did a Ryzen tournament, I think he would participate in that. But other than that, I don't think he's going to stick around in a promotion long enough that anyone's going to want to sign him, because it'd be a one-off or two-off fight. I think Ryzen is the only one that really fits that.
Kenny, what do you think? Where do you think JDS should go? Do you prefer fighters to retire? Do you think that JDS is at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if both of them retire, to be honest. I mean, no disrespect, they're absolute legends of the sport, but I just think they're a little bit too inconsistent now, and they're a bit chinny, and when you get hit so many times and knocked out like that, there's only you can't take those kind of shots, and if JDS says he's going to go into boxing, I mean, I don't know how well he could do in that. I mean, boxing, if it's only pure boxing, then that's going to be, I would assume, more difficult for him, even though he's, a boxer type of fighter. Yeah, man. For me personally, I would want to see them retire.
Now, when I look at Overeem, right? Overeem, he has close ties with Scott Coker. They've been working together for many, many years. So we could look into that and say maybe they've been talking and they're going to bring Overeem over. And Christopher, he mentions Overeem versus Fedor. That could be a possible fight over in Japan, right? A collaboration with Ryzen. I look at it like this, like a lot of these guys, they don't want to retire, but they still want to fight, right? So at the end of your career, you've accomplished a lot. Both of these guys are legends of the heavyweight division. What about padding your record at the end of your career just to get the competition taste? You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You don't have to chase a belt forever. Of course, you want to have big fights, but do you really want to take that risk? That's why I say like one championship would be a good spot. They could go kind of pad their record. They could get that feeling, of like the competition and fighting and winning, but still not face guys like Volkov where he could just destroy you on the feet, right? Like, do you want to do that? Do you want to continue fighting that way, or do you want to face the dangerous talent, right? Both these guys most likely won't go to PFL because the PFL format, the season format, it's so different from what fighters are used to. Like, you have to fight so many times in a short period of like a period of months, right? And a lot of these guys are used to fighting, taking 3 months off, fighting, or taking 5 months off fighting. Like, when you go from doing that to like 3 fights in 3 months, it's your body probably won't be able to handle it, especially with Overeem and JDS. These guys are much older and later in their career with a lot of fights. But I want to see them continue, man. I want to see them. If they want to continue, I want them to continue. If they want to retire, I want them to retire. That's my attitude on fighters, is let them choose what they want to do. Christopher says sign with Bellator and fight Fedor in a cross promotion fight in Japan. That could be a possibility, right? We just mentioned that. PFL, I just talked about that. Yeah, $1 million is very enticing, but speaking with a few of the PFL fighters, the champions that are returning, they're saying like a lot of these guys won't be able to even make it to the playoffs. Like, their body won't even be able to handle it. And that's the biggest concern with Anthony Pettis when he signed, right? It's like Anthony Pettis is known to be injured a lot, like especially during fights. And how is he going to return if he breaks his hand in the first fight? Can he return 2 months later? A lot of the fights are already set, especially the regular season. So if you can't make it to your fights, then how are you going to make it to the playoffs? It doesn't make, it's very difficult. So I want to see, like, if I had a choice, I would like to see Overeem go to one championship. I want to see him go face like Rung. I want to see him go face like the guys that are coming up, like a Buchecha. I want to go see him face.
You sure you don't want him to just retire if you want him to fight Rug right now?
Well, the thing is, like, Overeem has like this like veteran savvy. You know what I mean? Like, of course he's very inconsistent, but he does have that veteran savvy where he can go in against someone like Rug that is inexperienced and use the veteran tricks to beat him and even finish him. We've seen him do it to many guys, right? Even Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt. I think a lot of people, when they're entering that fight against Mark Hunt, people thought Overeem's chin is gone. Mark Hunt's going to touch him. It's going to be over. And what did Overeem do? He went in there and knocked out Mark Hunt, right? It was like, I was surprised in that fight too, to be honest with you. So it's gonna be fun to see where they go. But wherever they go, they're going to have to get paid, dude, because I think that's the biggest reason why the UFC let these guys go, is because they don't see where they're going in their career. And instead of keeping them around too long, they might as well just let that big salary, dump that, invest that big salary into some other guys. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of these younger guys, the younger heavyweights that are coming up, they have to renegotiate and they're going to want some more money, right? And of course, they're going to be able to pay them more, but less than what they pay Overeem and JDS. These guys are making 6 figures a fight. Fedor, it's like Fedor's still hanging around there. We'll see what happens with that.
And I would say too, real quickly, I think I think you're spot on with it's the pay, right? Because Overeem had that ridiculous contract from Pride, I believe, that carried over forever. So he was making there's that infamous quote where Stipe was, Overeem made more money than me when Stipe fought him. That's crazy. But I think it's so, I think that's a big part of it. But I think the other part is of where they are in their divisions as well, in terms of being good enough to still compete against, as you said, against some of those up and coming guys. If you look at Overeem, he lost to Volkov, he lost to Rosenstruck, but just at the end there, if he had held on another 10 seconds, he would have won that fight. And he's good enough that he's probably somewhere in that 5 to 10 range in the rankings, and he probably would hang out there, maybe go 10 to 15 eventually. But that hurts up and coming guys. That hurts the UFC when they're building stars, when they're trying to get people, okay, we've tested them out a couple times against unranked guys, let's give them a ranked opponent. Okay, now they've beaten somebody, and now they have a number next to their name. All right, let's kind of push them. If then they run into an Overeem who just shuts them down, that hurts the UFC because they don't end up getting to push the guy that they've now invested in, and they still can't give Overeem a title shot because he's past his prime and past the point where he can make another title run. If you look at Anthony Pettis when he signed to the PFL, they said they wanted to keep him fighting at welterweight and add more up and coming guys. That was part of the reason Pettis left. Same with Romero. Romero was talking about we're going to move up to light heavyweight and fight a number one contender right away, go for the belt. And they were like, no, you can fight some of these no name guys or guys that are number 15 in the rankings up and coming and gatekeep. But if you're not going to gatekeep, we're definitely not paying you that money. So I think it's the combination of the two. It's not only how much they're paying them, but then how good they are. Because look at Arlovsky. Why is Andrei Arlovsky still around? He's making almost just as much as Overeem. And I love Andrei Arlovsky. I love to watch him fight, but he's not making a title run or probably even cracking the rankings anytime here soon. And yet he's still around because they're using him as a gatekeeper. They're using him as a guy against the Tom Aspinalls now we can now start to push Tom Aspinall because now he's beat a name, Arlovsky. That's a huge part of this, I think.
Yeah. And this doesn't bode well for a lot of the other guys that are still on the roster. Like you mentioned, Arlovsky, Olenek, guys that are losing against the up-and-coming guys and kind of falling out of the rankings slowly. And they better be careful. We might see them being cut real soon or eventually after their next fight where they face another up-and-coming guy. And if they lose, and one thing about Arlovsky, he's kept himself as the gatekeeper. It's like he's comfortable in that role. I feel like Overeem and JDS didn't want to get into that role, and it kind of didn't fall in line, like you said, with the UFC's plans. So they said, "Okay, buddy, here's your papers. There you go. Let's see what you can do out in the open market." And hey, it's business, right? It's business. There's no loyalty. We know that from how the UFC does anything in this sport, that loyalty is only there as long as you're doing what they want you to do. And then once it's not happening that way, then, it is what it is. We got to let you go. But, ending on that note, man, we went an hour and a half. It was good. It was fun. It's always good to have people on the show that are educated in things that I don't have no idea about, and he can educate everybody that's listening and educate me. Everybody remember to follow Patrick on Twitter. Patrick, tell them what your Twitter is and where they can find you and everything.
Yeah, so Twitter is all day Auger, so all day and then AUGER. You can find all my work at the Body Lock now. Like and subscribe. Fight Business Podcast. I'll be dropping a new one of those tomorrow, so make sure to check out that one. But yeah, no, I mean, just check out the Body Lock YouTube page, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and yeah, follow me on Twitter at alldayoj.
All right, Kenny, how about you? Let them know what's going on with you.
I'm just the guy starting out, but you can follow me on Twitter on Twitter and Instagram on just Kenny Lee MMA, which is KENNYLEE MMA. And if you wanna join the MMA media industry, then MMA Sucka is always open. I've learned a lot of stuff from there. I've learned how to write previews and play-by-play and results, fight announcements, all that kind of stuff. And it's a great practice to get it in those reps. So yeah,
I second that. MMA Sucka. Shout out to MMA Sucka. Great. If you want to do MMA journalism, hit those guys up for sure.
Yeah, shout out to Jeremy Brand. He's been a good help as well. If I've missed something out, he'll message me and be like, he'll check me and be like, "Hey Kenny, you just need to do this and that," and just give those little tips. So that's always good.
For sure. Yeah, Jeremy Brand, he is one of the nicest guys out there and knows his shit. So everybody, before we go, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to my guests. Appreciate the time that you guys put out for your day to join me and just chat about the world of MMA. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share and all that good stuff. We'll be back next week, same time, with another guest. And this guest is somebody that's on the Bellator ranking panel. No, is he? I think he is. No, if he's not, maybe. I don't know. I forgot. But anyways, he's a good guest. I'll let you guys know next week who he is. And yeah,